What's up, guys? Marcellus Williams, aka TheSwolefessor, here to educate you on health and social well-being. And today I want to talk to you guys about 5 things that I believe are very important considerations if you plan on coaching female lifters. And the reason I want to do this video is for a couple of reasons. One, I've experienced that just a lot of things that I do with my own female lifters are things that they are very appreciative of, because it's things that coaches they worked with before either didn't do, or if they were coaching themselves, things that they didn't consider that have made a huge difference on their overall performance, health, everything like that, right? And the other reason is the fact that I get quite a few questions from other coaches, specifically male coaches, who ask questions about like, hey man, how do you go about this with some of your female lifters? And it occurred to me that I don't think I've even really seen that many videos over like, different approaches to take with female lifters, aside from like the basic stuff like, oh, females can handle more volume, which is something I'll also be covering in this video. But these are 5 things that I believe that if you keep these in mind with your own lifters, then whether you're a male coach coaching female lifters or you're a female yourself coaching the female lifters, it's just going to make your job a lot easier. It's going to make your job a lot more enjoyable, and it's going to hopefully allow you to build even better connections with your female athletes. So with that being said, let's get right into it. All right, guys, so the first point that I want to go over is how to find a balance between professionalism and friendship when it comes to your female lifters. And the reason why I think it's important is because it's something that I feel a lot of male coaches just honestly overthink. And here's why. My general rule of thumb, and this is with any client, whether it's a female client, male client, whatever, is the fact that you will develop that relationship over time in whatever natural way just kind of occurs. Meaning I have some clients where, we just have a very straightforward professional business relationship in the sense of the only thing they ever really talk about is training or anything related to their training or variables outside their life that relate to their training. And that's totally fine so long as the client is getting everything they need. I don't try to force a friendship. At the same time, I have a lot of clients where a friendship naturally just kind of does occur, and they feel very open talking about things even outside of their training, and that can be a good thing since we know that things that impact us outside our training can impact our training. At the end of the day, so long as all your clients are getting what they need, that's the biggest thing. But the thing is, I've never had this issue where because a client is a female, I feel like, oh, there's only a certain level of friendship that can be allowed, or, oh, there's certain things that I should never talk about or say with that client, because that's going to come down to each individual. There should always be a certain level of professionalism no matter who you're working with, whether it's a guy or a girl, right? But as far as what all topics you can discuss, how much you can joke around with them, just let that occur naturally. Don't assume that just because you're a male coach, you have a female client, that a friendship can never occur. Because if anything, I found that forming good friendships with a lot of my female clients, funnily enough, the same way with my male clients, allows the coaching to be a lot smoother. They feel a lot more open with talking to me about certain things. It allows me to keep them in a better headspace. And that's the thing, just get to know your clients as individuals, regardless if they're male or female. This should be something that's fairly obvious, but once again, this is a question that I get commonly from other male coaches about hey man, how do you find that balance between friendship and professionalism? Do you joke around with the female clients? Do you talk about stuff outside their training? And it just comes down to the individual. I have some female clients where all we talk about is their training, the same way that I have some male clients where all we talk about is their training. I have some female clients where we send freaking memes back and forth to each other, and same thing with male clients. So it's all about just, get to know that person as an individual and let that relationship as a coach and client just develop naturally. Don't try to force it to be one thing or another. Just let it occur naturally. And then of course also know what your standards are and what your boundaries are so that your client can be aware of that as well. So that's the first point that I want to knock out. It's a little bit more, subjective, there's a little more nuance to it, but to me that's the simplest way to approach it. All right, guys, point number 2 is going to be the importance of learning your female clients' menstrual cycles. This, I can't express how important this is. And it honestly surprises me that there's so many coaches who don't even think to do this. This is going to be huge. We already know that when it comes to, tracking variables and tracking trends as far as performance, fatigue, what are things we look at? Sleep, eating, stress. Do they have a physically demanding job? Are they sitting down a lot of their jobs? Is their job sedentary? So all those things play a role, right? So with your female clients, obviously their menstrual cycle is going to play a role as well, because it's a little bit different for everyone. I have some female clients where their training takes a big hit the week of their menstrual cycle because they just feel a lot weaker. I have some female clients where they can't even train the first couple of days of their menstrual cycle because of how much pain and discomfort they're in. I have other female clients where nothing really changes. Yeah, they know they're on it and they might feel a little bit of discomfort here and there, but they can train totally normally. And then I have others where they actually perform better. They actually get a little boost in performance. It's the craziest thing. But when we think about the fact that, the different hormone fluctuations and how that can be affected, testosterone, estrogen, and how it's a little bit different for each woman, it's very important to be able to track this and to know, okay, what are the symptoms? What is their fatigue like when they're on their cycle? Do they perform better? Do they perform worse? So that way you can already be planning for that and accounting for that when you're writing out their blocks, right? That way, maybe if you usually typically, like, we typically push their heaviest exertion on this week, but you realize that for that block, that week's going to fall on, like, their menstrual cycle, and I know that they respond poorly, then maybe you adjust things to where you push things a week early or a week later. So that way you're not trying to have them take the heaviest loads during the, time of the month that they feel the worst. If there's somebody where they respond that way. Whereas if there's somebody where they actually seem to perform better, you might want to time it where it's on the same week, right? So it's a very simple thing, and this also leads back to point number one, where just, developing a natural relationship with your female clients makes sense, so that way they can feel comfortable and open and talking to you about that and talking to you about what their symptoms are, so that way you can account for whatever you need to when it comes to adjusting the programming, because it's going to impact their fatigue, it's going to impact their performance, and sometimes it can even cause things to, like, feel a little bit more comfortable as far as, like, soreness or pain. Like, I have some female clients where, like, their backs flare up really, really bad when they're on their menstrual cycle. Well, if I don't know anything about that and I just feel like, oh man, their backs are hurting, okay, I gotta pull all this workload back so that, their back stops hurting. When in actuality, like, you just gotta let them get through that week, maybe make some adjustments during that week, and then they'll be totally fine. So it's very important that you, discuss this with your female clients, and that you know exactly, okay, how does this impact this individual, so you can work around it. All right, guys, point number 3 is going to be the importance of your female client's nutrition. Now, I'm a big believer that, if you're trying to truly maximize your potential as a coach, you need to have some type of background knowledge in nutrition, right? You need to understand, like, calories, macros, micronutrition. I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where, like, I have some clients who are nutrition-only clients because maybe they have a powerlifting coach, but their powerlifting coach doesn't really, they don't know a whole lot about nutrition, they don't trust themselves to deal with their clients' nutrition, so then they can come to me for that. Whereas with my full coaching clients, they get all of it, the program and nutrition. And even though this is important for all clients, both male and females, I've just found that I have to be a little bit more on top of it when it comes to my female clients. One, I found that a lot of my female clients, their weight fluctuations are far more drastic based upon, like, how much they're eating, what they're eating, compared to a lot of my male clients. And are there exceptions? Of course, always. But for the most part, that's what I found in general, right? Beyond that is also the fact that more than likely, when it comes to, like, males and females are more likely to have dealt with or eventually deal with some type of eating disorder. So I find that kind of nipping that in the bud and being on top of that and trying to, teach my female clients, like, good eating habits, teach them that, hey, these are just numbers, it's about fuel, it's about performance, and, getting our body composition where we want, versus, like, getting caught up in, like, the different fad diets and stuff like that is very, very important, as well as the fact that it's going to have a greater impact on, like, their hormones and stuff like that. For example, how low fats you can get away with eating as a female is going to be different than as a male on average, due to the fact that fats are a big part of our overall, like, hormone regulation as well, as far as the endocrine system. That's true for male and females, but even more so with females, it's something you have to be really, really careful with, especially if you're dealing with something where, okay, you are trying to help one of your female clients lose weight. You want to make sure you're going about that, in a way that truly works for them as an individual, not only, from the physiological aspect of, like, okay, where's your protein, where's your carbs, where's your fats, but also the mental aspect of how you're gonna go with it. You're also more than likely, when it comes to your female clients, going to deal with things like, hypothyroidism and just different hormonal issues that may impact, like, at what rate they can lose weight or what foods they're going to respond best to. Once again, there's going to be exceptions where you might have some male clients who deal with that too, but I've just found that when it comes to my knowledge on nutrition, it has been the most useful when it comes to my female clients, both for, like, just the mental aspect of it that a lot of females tend to deal with, as well as the fact that it's going to play a greater role with things like their weight fluctuation, hormone regulation, so on and so forth. So making sure that you understand the importance of nutrition and how you're going to approach nutrition with your female clients, very simple, but also very underrated thing to be on top of. All right, guys, now point number 4 is, as I mentioned earlier, the fact that your female athletes on average are going to be able to handle more relative volume than what your male athletes are going to be able to do. Now, does this mean that you need to be giving, like, your female athletes, like, double the volume that you do your male athletes? No, but it's simply understanding that they are probably going to be able to handle a little bit more than what your male clients do on average. So, for example, if it's something where maybe you usually find that, okay, if assuming, like, leverages and stuff like that are, like, similar, that you give a male client maybe, like, 3 sets on something, you might be able to get away with giving a female client 4 sets on it. If it's something where you usually give a male client 4 sets on it, you might be able to get away with giving a female client 5 sets on it. But the thing is, even if you do have a female client where maybe they're not super well leveraged for a lift, so giving them too many sets or too much volume on that lift beats them up, know that in the same way you would make up for that with excessive work with your male clients, you do it with your female clients, but you're probably gonna be able to make up for it a little bit more. So once again, if it's something where, on, like, let's say you're doing belt squats because your female client can only handle, like, 3 to 4 sets of squats in a given day without, their back feeling too beat up, just due to how they're leveraged, right? Well, if you maybe do about like, 3 sets of bell squats for male clients, you're probably gonna be able to get away with pushing like 4 or 5 sets on the bell squat with your female client. And at the end of the day, it still comes down to working with that individual and seeing what their specific tolerances are, because there are gonna be exceptions. There's going to be, you're gonna have some female lifters where maybe they don't handle as much volume as what you thought they'd be able to, even though they're female, right? The same way you're gonna have some male clients who are just workhorses and can take insane amounts of volume, right? But it's just knowing that on average, that's usually what the rule is going to be, that they can handle a little bit more relative volume. And it's really good to take advantage of that both through their main lifts and their accessories, especially when we consider the fact that, it's harder for female lifters to build muscle usually anyway. So you definitely don't want to be shortchanging them with their volume in any sense of the word. You want to make sure that you're, doing pretty much as much they can get away with recovering from. So that way you're maximizing their muscle growth, as well as making sure they're getting that skill retention that they need from, their back down volume with the squat, bench, deadlift, and then just getting the rest of what you need from accessories. But I can't express that enough. Whereas with a lot of male lifters, even though yes, you get a certain amount of volume to get certain adaptation, there are often times where if you don't quite push the volume where it needs to be, you can kind of make up for it with intensity and load. Whereas with female lifters, you have to be a lot more careful with that, which works out perfectly because that goes into point number 5. All right, guys, and point number 5, and what's going to be the final point of this video, is going to be understanding how to program intensity when it comes to your female lifters. And the reason why this is important is because on average, once again, always exceptions, but on average, females don't tend to recover from intensity quite as quickly as what male lifters do. So it doesn't mean that they don't need intensity, but it's the fact that you have to be careful with how often you're pushing it and how heavy you're going and how frequently you're going heavy, right? So essentially, for example, if I have a male lifter where I may be comfortable with doing something like, okay, give him like an RP6 week 1, RP7 week 2, and RP8 week 3, and knowing that he'll still be good on week 4 to come in and push an RP9, that's not something that I tend to do with female lifters. In general, that's not something that I tend to do very often at all. I usually give somebody an RP8 or an RP9, but what I have found is with a lot of my male lifters, I can get away with doing that. Like, okay, they can hit an RP8 one week and then come in and still smash an RP9 and get pretty significant load increase. Whereas with my female lifters, I find that when they kind of get near that threshold of where intensity tends to be at, like, at RP8, then if I try to push an RP9 the following week, they're not going to be able to boost it by that much more by anything really like, marginal. And that's just because the fact that they take longer to recover from intensity. So with a female lifter, I might do something more like RP5, RP6, RP7, then week 4 can be an RP8 or an RP9 based upon what I'm trying to do and like what intensity I'm trying to get to, versus having them hit an RP8 one week and RP9 the following week, just because it takes a little bit longer for them to recover from it. Now, with that being said, it's still important for them to make sure they're getting that heavy exposure, because in the same way that it sometimes takes longer for them to recover from it, oftentimes female lifters don't hold on to their intensity responsiveness as long in terms of adaptations. Meaning, like, if you give some male lifters like some heavy sets of 4 or whatever, right? And they stay away from singles for a while, and then you eventually transition down to triples, doubles, singles. It tends to be a little bit of a smoother transition than with certain female lifters. I find that there's just kind of like a bigger difference between what they can maybe do for like a single to a double. Once again, there's exceptions. A lot of this has to do with how lifters leverage, whether they be male or female. But what I have found is, like, for example, on bench, I like to make sure that my female lifters have singles year-round, period. Some type of singles that they're used to having that heavier weight in their hand, especially since women tend to not have as much upper body mass. So getting them used to that skill practice and that constant exposure on the bench press is very, very useful. And this is also something that I do, for some of my male lifters, especially my lighter male lifters, but I found that it's almost, not always, but for the most part, almost a necessity for my female lifters, almost regardless of weight class, to keep them used to those heavier exposures, right? And then once again, like I said, even with some male lifters where maybe a block, their heaviest set is like a heavy set of 4 or 5. With my female lifters, their heaviest set is almost always going to be like a triple, double, or single, something like that, so that they can stay used to being under certain intensities all the time, certain heavier loads, and kind of holding on to those adaptations, right? But at the same time, it's something where, when it comes to like their back down work, for example, even though I'm a big believer in sub-max back down work as a whole, I find that I can allow my male lifters back down work to be a little bit heavier relative based upon percentage drops than my female lifters, because once again, just how they recover from it. And it's also the fact that, okay, if I can get away with the fact that female lifters tend to recover from overall more volume, then I can really take advantage of that on the back downs, get the heavy exposure that they need on their top set, and then go ahead and get some nice sub-max back down work in, but maybe boost the volume, even though like the weight might be lighter, not just objectively, but like relatively lighter than what it'd be for a male lifter. I can get away by making up for that by having them push more volume, right? So that's something that I think is very important, because that fine line, that fine balance. I find some coaches where they don't give their female lifters enough heavy work to where they don't ever really get the skill or the adaptations that they need to be used to certain intensities. At the same time, I see oftentimes where like, they'll kind of give them heavy work too often. They'll give them like too heavy a back down work because like, oh, well, this works for my male lifters, misunderstanding that the intensity responsiveness for female lifters usually is going to be different. Now, I do have some clients where like that's not the case. Like my client Bella is somebody where I found, as far as what she can kind of handle volume wise, is a lot more similar to what a guy can handle. As far as her like retention of intensity and like how often she can push intensity is a lot more similar to my male clients than my other female clients. So there's always exceptions, right? And that's the thing with all these points, right? There's always going to be exceptions. So I don't want you guys to take this as just like absolutely like, okay, I do this for all my female lifters, I do this for all my male lifters. Get to know your client as an individual, get to learn their body and try different things programming wise and see what works for them. But this is all just helping you guys have like, an idea and a baseline, especially like, if you're a newer coach where you've never really coached female lifters, or if you're a male coach where you have a lot of experience with male lifters but not female lifters. Hopefully these bullet points will give you like some type of idea about, okay, kind of where you can start and kind of how to think about approaching some of this stuff. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to be limited, right? In the same way that as a coach, if you want to grow, you don't want to be limited by like, not having enough knowledge of programming or technique or nutrition or movement rehab and prehab. You don't want to limit your coaching capabilities by only being able to work with male lifters, right? Because you aren't comfortable coaching female lifters because you feel like you don't know how to talk to them, or you feel like you don't know how to program for them. So hopefully this all gives you like some type of idea of where to be. So that's pretty much it for the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, go leave a comment down below, let me know what you did. If you're not, leave a comment down below, let me know what can be better. Like the video, share, subscribe. Keep it simple, specific, scientific. I'll catch you guys later.